All right, guys, let's take a look at the markets at close. And we've had the trades go against us from yesterday. Yesterday at the close, we did see the S&P 500 sell off below 324, only to pop up $3 today. And again, we did go short the SPY yesterday, short emerging markets, long the TLT. TLT fell $1.30 today. GDX is down 70 cents. The dollar index rose to 98, and the VIX sold off 11%. So what's happening here? Well, there's one key company that's having earnings tomorrow, which Warren Buffett owns $70 billion stake in this company. And that is, of course, America's shining champion telecommunication company, Apple, as well as tech company. Its products are doing very well, but more importantly, Apple employs approximately, or supports in one way or another, over 10 million Chinese whose starting pay begins at about $3.50 an hour to assemble iPhones. And so we can see this stock has just been on a tear ever since that sell-off last December. Not this December, but the previous December, where it had that massive sell-off. And you can see it's gone from $140 a share at the low to $317. We had a little bit of a sell-off, but barely a blip. Now it's jumping back and ready to rip into new highs. So is Apple going to single-handedly save the entire world stock market? You would presume so, as their rumor to increase output by 10% caused emerging markets to rebound today, even though they're facing an epidemic virus that has a third of their country shut down. So it's just ridiculous. But we can certainly understand what's going on because of that. So what exactly is going on with the coronavirus? Well, we went from exponential growth from our updates, which you can see right here. See if I can expand that for us. To actually it suddenly stalling. And this is after the case count literally doubling in a single day. So I do think that they are withholding data because it's beneficial to China and America. We've seen some cooperation between President Xi saying the disease is accelerating, but pushing that announcement to last Saturday. And Trump saying that President Xi's great and has this all under control right after the stock market was closing Friday. Meanwhile, they're suddenly having the death count massively increase in sudden shocks. We're seeing cases start to spread towards India, reportedly our first death in that area, and there's over 100 cases being studied in the U.S. We can see that they've already picked up 5 cases officially in the U.S. in 3 different locations. Canada has a case. France just reported 4. So it's certainly spreading. I think it's foolish to believe that when China shuts down 13 cities inhabiting 50 million people, that the worst is over yet. Here's another website I found that collects a lot of content from a lot of sources and puts it in one location. So we can see that Breaking Germany reports 3 new cases of coronavirus. 70 passengers refused to board a plane with Wuhan residents, causing a 5-hour standoff. I think there is a lot of people returning back home from the lunar holiday, New Year holiday. Most countries are advising not to visit China. There are secret missions underway to get diplomats out from each country, and those diplomats are going into quarantined zones for several weeks once they get back. Now we're seeing Chinese New Yorkers worried about the coronavirus. Probably smart. United Airlines suspends some flights between U.S. and China as coronavirus spreads. WHO admits a error in assessment of deadly coronavirus risk. The WHO, that is. United cancels some China-Hong Kong flights. Back from China, 3 admitted to Delhi's hospital for coronavirus. This was just an hour and a half ago. France Director of Health reports 4th severe case in Paris. 2 headlines here relating Apple to China. Chinese coronavirus slows down new Apple iPhone manufacturing. Then we get a leak that they want to increase production 10% overnight, which was this big boom today in the markets ahead of their earnings at the close. Coronavirus outbreak is threatening Apple's supply chain. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam announces the suspension of the high-speed rail service and all cross-border ferry services between the city and mainland China in a bid to stop the spread of the coronavirus. This is a video of Wuhan's once packed highways, which again has a population larger than New York. And you can see it is just completely dead. Not a single soul. Next, I want to look at some of the markets, other stock markets. So China is closed this week. They're supposed to open Friday, but they decided not to open their markets back till Monday, so far at least. Friday they were closed when all this news started to hit. But Thursday it seems like they just lost control of keeping this hush-hush. As we can see, the big sell-off. And if we go back a few days, it was very odd that the U.S. stock market was doing so well this entire period of time, but China, who was potentially going to be getting massive financing from U.S. banks in exchange for purchasing $200 billion in goods, their market was all of a sudden selling off. And so that was an alarm bell that we were watching. And you can see in the last month, really this started to sell off. So most likely they did know full well what was going on, try to keep it as hush-hush as they could, and get to the holiday period so their stock market could close before they let all this go public. So you can see that looks like it's just falling off a cliff. And I highly doubt that's just going to rebound come next week as we get more and more data about what's really going on in China here. Okay, now here's a look at the Kospi, the South Korean index, obviously highly correlated to China, to the stock market. And it was closed as well for the New Year holiday, but it did open today. And you can see it is not behaving anything like the U.S. stock market and had quite a sell-off and gap lower, showing more weakness in stocks. Now, if I do zoom out to a longer-term chart, we can go back to September when the Fed began to stop cutting interest rates and start going into quantitative easing. Is exactly when this trend began and was in a very upward trajectory. And so it's really not until this virus news started hitting markets that we've seen very much volatility at all in stocks. And interesting enough, the only times the Fed has not increased its balance sheet was November, and then most recently at the very end of December and so far into January. It's been a net drawdown in the balance sheet of the Fed. And those are 2 months where we see some pretty good volatility in stocks. And this is at the same time that we're having this epidemic start to unravel in China. So here we are with a quick update now that the market has closed. No big fireworks, very close to where we previewed just a minute ago. So what's my expectation? There could be some strength tomorrow in the SPY if Apple has great earnings. And I do think we're going to see a suppression of information about China's problem unraveling as much as they possibly can, but especially until the weekend. So I would suspect that we don't see some big jumps in the confirmed case count, at least from China, potentially until this weekend. So that's one. And again, that's a maybe. Two, I am interested in seeing the cases pop up around the world. So if we do continue to see that grow at just around one incident per day, or even every other day per country, that's going to be very alarming. And I think the ultimate sell-off for the stock market will be to see incidents in America go from current level of 5 to 10. If we get to 10, then it's pretty easy to calculate that that number's doubled and is on a potentially exponential track like we saw in China, which, remember, began supposedly back in early December and took 2 full months to grow to where it's at today. So if the dollar's strengthening, that signals weakness in emerging markets, especially China. And here's something interesting. Now, I have been picking up some good information out of Reddit, but this member's posting that Tencent invested $150 million into Reddit, and Tencent is controlled by China. So there's probably definitely some censorship happening here. I can personally tell you Twitter and YouTube have been heavily censoring anything about this development.
Hello， 大家好。希望每个能看到我视频的朋友们都能够比较珍惜我这个视频，因为实在是发之不易。在我们中国大陆。是吧？要翻墙，要克服各种各样的困难，而且网络延迟特别的卡，所以我也是被逼无奈才跑到这个位置，是吧？希望有更多的华人同胞，有更多心地善良的人能够看到，能够注意到，这是武汉肺炎。所谓的冠状病毒，这是疫情的严重性和我们本地人生活的一个实际情况。现在整个武汉市所有的交通枢纽、公共交通全部被停掉了，然后据说加油站也停止加油了。然后呢，我不禁有几点疑问，比方说。你家里的亲人有个什么高血压呀、心脏病啊，现在需要去医院，怎么去呢？打那个急救电话120，各位可以试一下，根本就打不通，完全就打不通，一直是忙音。再比方说，你怀疑自个儿是否染上了这次的武汉肺炎吧？你想去医院做一个那个诊断。你根本就去不了，你怎么去？医院人满为患，医生他不叫你去挂号什么，就排队。你排几个小时可能都不搭理你。你本来没什么事，你去排队，可能就交叉感染了。然后我再说一个，我眼亲看到的，在1月23号武汉封城之前的头一天，22号，包括22号之前，整个武汉市满大街。戴口罩的人都不多，一大堆就是不戴口罩的，还在麻将室里面打麻将，还在到处交头接耳，包括一些小贩。我也想问一下，我们大家一块在这个公共平台上探讨一下，武汉市市长、党委书记在干什么？作为一个地方的高级官员、一把手。他们难道没有得到信息吗？如果说他们第一时间得到了信息，为什么没有全程的电视讲话？没有第一时间的，甚至强制性的要求我们老百姓戴口罩，提高防范的警惕呢？如果说他没有得到信息，那就说明他失职，这个人根本就不适合做地方官，早就该滚蛋了。难道不是这个样子吗？那我的逻辑。
So this goes on for a while, but you can see what on earth are they going to do as the food runs out and people have no new income. this could turn into a disaster quickly. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Twitter now and pick up some coronavirus tweets I want to show. And then we'll switch gears and close out looking at some other risks in the market. Okay, so Starbucks Corp currently has half of its stores closed. China's Chongqing says it has asked all companies in the city not to resume work before February 10th. And he, Quotha the Raven, who's been going off about this, he's a character on YouTube, says he thinks it'll get pushed to March. So is this entire market rally all about Apple? It'll be interesting to see how these earnings print out in short order here. This is over at NPR. Acclaimed Harvard scientist is arrested, accused of lying about ties to China. Charles Lieber, the chair of Harvard University's Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology, has been arrested and criminally charged with making false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements to the U.S. Defense Department about its ties to a Chinese government program to recruit foreign scientists and researchers. He's also accused of lying about a lucrative contract he signed with China's Wuhan University of Technology. This is looking uglier by the minute. Zero Hedge writes, think the S&P 500's multiple expansion was impressive, and I think it hit 18.6 at the high, which is much less than the dot-com bubble where it hit 25, but still very, very elevated. But you can see we've had a 10% PE expansion in the most recent move in 2019 on the S&P 500 versus a 25% PE multiple expansion on Apple, as it's done this primarily by buying back its own stock. Dr. Zhong Nanshan, who helped solve the SARS, supposedly, in Guangdong, although that's critiqued for being a big cover-up and it could have been solved much sooner with much less. And keep in mind, SARS didn't spread until you were infected, one, and two, its incubation period was much shorter, about half as long. So from that standpoint, it was much easier to identify who was sick and to quarantine them and stop the spread. With this one, the big thing is that the virus travels invisibly and is already out. It's already spreading. And you won't know that you have it until you're already spread it to many more people. So we'll see if this happens, but I highly doubt it based on the growth of the cases, 3 hospitals being built. It just doesn't make sense. You don't shut down a third of China if you think this is going to be over in 7 to 10. Okay, so here are the tweets we've seen from Trump on the topic. We are in very close communication with China concerning the virus. Very few cases reported in USA, but strongly on watch. In fact, they're now screening at 20 airports with the thermometers. But again, the virus can easily get past that because it is in people before they have a fever and spreads contagiously. That's what is being reported, or at least not by any big officials. We have offered China and President Xi any help that is necessary. Our experts are extraordinary. China has been working very hard to contain the coronavirus. The United States greatly appreciates their efforts and transparency. It will all work out well. In particular, on behalf of the American people, I want to thank you, President Xi. This was on the 24th. All right, here is the moment the market's been waiting for, apparently, which is Apple has beat its estimated $4.56 earnings per share with $4.99, and its revenue is beating by about 2% or 3%, so $91.8 billion. Certainly the markets will like that. So now that Apple's national champion has been able to report its earnings, will they allow the negative news flow to continue out of China? We'll see. But I do expect the SPY will be up tomorrow morning. TLT will be a little lower, maybe. But again, I'm not concerned, as I do think the real crisis is right ahead of us here. All right, guys, thanks for your time listening to today's evening update. Tomorrow I'll try to cover more of the risks of the impeachment trial, which we will have a lot more news on. We have the Fed coming up this week, and then also we have the risk of Bernie Sanders becoming the Democratic nominee. So those are three big risks outside of the coronavirus causing damage to China and thus to emerging markets. Okay, thanks.